Hello and welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to look at Unit 0.2, just it's our second day of class. We're going to be doing some sourcing today. We're going to go over map expectations, summer assignment, test, basics, also basic classroom stuff today, and then do an example of sourcing. So, all right, moving on. All right, so our daily 5 though. So feel free to pause and read, right, answer the question. And welcome back. So the correct answer here is, hopefully you got the correct answer, was 2. All right. Next one. So go ahead and pause. All right, so we actually spent a few minutes in this class since we haven't actually gone through what these things are in class. So this is more of a kind of a skill practice for multiple choice. You're going to come across questions this year that weren't in the reading, didn't cover in class, but you might know something about it and be able to answer this question. So, when all the classes who have done this today in class, most of them use papyrus as their way of knowing that it was Egypt, right, in the Nile. And then there was one or two kids today whose I guess lack of knowledge of what these were helped them get the correct answer. They saw flooding, or they saw rivers flooding, and they just saw Nile and then stopped reading, I guess, not knowing that all of these are river valleys. And so I do take a moment in class and just kind of go through what is Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, where is that? Do you know the name of the rivers that make up Mesopotamia? Most classes have a student who can identify the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. I asked for a geographic location for where it is today, modern day. So it's kind of run through those. The Huanghe River and the Yangtze rivers, these are the major river valleys in Chinese history. Where's Harappa, the Indus River? Where is that? I often ask, what modern day country is it? Don't say India. So we kind of run through those and where they are. I asked which one is the oldest example of a civilization, right, of these 4, right, because these are the river valley civilizations. So which one is the oldest? Go through that in class. All right. This next one. When I created this, I kind of thought it was a lollipop, but I did have a student say that they did not know what a primary source was. So with that being said, we do spend some time on this in class, just kind of what are some examples of primary sources besides all of these. So we just kind of go through the example of anything that is from the time period in which you are looking at. So if I'm looking at the Roman Empire, what's a primary source from the Roman Empire? It could be a diary from a person who lived there. It could be tax records, from the governmental bureaucracy. It could be pottery, right? So, design or art on pottery could be an example of a primary source, right? So and a lot of the documents which we work with in class are primary sources. Secondary sources, if George Washington had written an autobiography, that would be a primary source. If a person wrote a book about George Washington 10 years ago, that would be a secondary source. Your textbook is a secondary source. Your textbook is a secondary source unless your textbook is being used by somebody 200 years from now to understand what students were taught in the year 2021. All right, so secondary sources can also be primary sources, depending on how they're being used. All right, next one. So go ahead and pause this for a second. All right, so what is the correct answer here? Number 2 is the correct answer here. We do spend a moment in class also just talking about cultural diffusion because it is such an important concept in this class. So I'll have students define what cultural diffusion is, give an example of it. So, and I a lot of the times I'll get as an example or a definition syncretism. So cultural diffusion and syncretism are really important concepts in this class. So let me just kind of give you an example really quick. The one I usually give in class is, after 1492, Christianity was a culture that was diffused to the Americas. All right. So culture, Christianity, diffusion, right, spread from one place to another place, cultural diffusion. Once Christianity arrived in the Americas, what happens next? You do see it being practiced in a traditional way in a lot of places, but you also see it blending with other cultures. So Christianity mixed or blended with Native American religious beliefs and traditional African religious beliefs to form new religions like Condomble or Santiara or Vundun. Those are examples of syncretism, right? So cultural diffusion, right, and syncretism. Syncretism occurs because of cultural diffusion, right? So very important concepts for this class. Right, and this one here, this is just can you differentiate between opinion and fact? So pause it if you want to read that. Right, so the answer is obviously 2. All right. So from there, we just I go over the summer assignment. Make sure you know the maps. Make sure you know the appropriate cities and where they are. Make sure you can identify those because that's on Friday's test. And I just give students time to ask questions and there's some pretty good questions that I've been getting today from here. Like for example, what is Mexico? If you're using pure geography, then Mexico technically is part of North America. However, the College Board map doesn't simply use geography, right, alone. They use culture as part of the ways to create these regions, and Mexico is part of the Latin American cultural region. So that's why you see that there. So it depends, right? Right, so I've had a bunch of really good questions today about this. So if you have one, let me know. All right, so sourcing. So in class, I did have 1 or 2 yesterday that kind of made it through here, but most of my classes did not make it through sourcing this document yesterday. So in class today, I kind of caught everybody up on the same pace. So we read this document, and had the kids source it in class and then turn it in at the end of class. So if you haven't already done so, please pause and read. All right. Just as a reminder, after we've read this in class, use the sourcing flowchart to help you decide how you're going to source, right? So HIPP, right? Choose one of those 4 ways. So which one should you choose? If you don't know, use the flowchart. All right. So if you're familiar with President Benjamin Harrison, President of the United States, right? Or maybe kind of look at this sourcing tag. If you're familiar with that kind of stuff, then go ahead and source it for point of view. All right. If one of those 2 things doesn't work for you, if you didn't happen to have written a paper on Benjamin Harrison when you were in U.S. history class as an 8th grader, then you're probably not going to want to do that. Then move on, right? So look at the date. That's 1892. Do you know what's going on in the United States in 1892? If you know what's going on in the United States in 1892, then go ahead and source it for context, right? Small c, document-specific contextualization. If you're not that familiar with what was going on in 1892, then source it for who the audience is. Obviously, the president is making a speech. Who is the speech being directed towards, right? Who is the intended audience for this speech? If you don't know who that is, then there really wasn't much in that document to tell you who that was. Then source it for purpose, right? So what is the purpose of that speech, right? Or of this document, right? So try to figure that out. What's the purpose of this? Obviously this is being done for a reason. National holidays aren't simply created out of thin air. They're created for a purpose. So, and this should be something that's relevant to you because last summer, right, this most recent summer in June, there was a holiday that was created. So, right, You have a president of the United States creating a federal holiday being reported on in the New York Times. I guess if I were to do sourcing tag for this, I would say this was not behind their paywall. Right? This is a New York Times article that is free. Right? So I guess that might tell you something, that it's not behind their paywall. All right, so all else fails, give me purpose. All right. All right, and that's kind of where we ended off today. I did tell most of my classes that this document is actually part of a study that was done back in I think it was in the 80s at Stanford University, where they created multiple cohorts to kind of study how people with different levels of education and knowledge approach documents. So this was done at Stanford University. So one of the cohorts or groups was freshmen in college who had taken AP US History and earned 5s on that exam. I think is how it was put. Another one of the groups was history graduate students, and then another group was professors, history professors. And it was simply looking at how different people source. Right? So, but yeah, so that's kind of where we left off today. So if you're doing this from home, feel free to submit by email, and we'll go over responses in class tomorrow. All right, Sapriati.